It was 3:00 p.m., and the throbbing in my temples was a dull, insistent drum against my skull. I had just concluded a marathon negotiation over the division of shares for Nimic Corp. As I was about to close my eyes for a moment of respite, my personal phone, lying on the passenger seat, buzzed to life. The name Ethan Hayes danced across the screen. But when I answered, the voice that came through was not his. It belonged to a woman. Her tone a practiced blend of urgency and professional calm. She identified herself as a nurse in the emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital. The owner of the phone, she explained, had been in a serious car accident and was currently in critical condition. They needed a family member to come to the hospital immediately to sign the necessary paperwork. As a divorce lawyer, I had witnessed every imaginable catastrophe that could tear a family apart. I prided myself on possessing a heart forged into steel by countless case files filled with betrayal and heartbreak. Yet in that instant, as the words accident and critical condition collided in my mind, a brief black void opened up. It was the pure primal panic of biological instinct. For several seconds after I hung up, my hand trembled so violently that I couldn't fit the key into the ignition on the first try. I cleared my entire afternoon schedule and drove with a reckless abandon that defied every traffic law. A 40-minute drive was compressed into a frantic 20. I burst into the ER, my heels clicking sharply against the linoleum. A jarring sound amidst the controlled chaos and the biting antiseptic smell that clung to the air. Following the directions from the nurse's station, I hurried down a crowded corridor, my eyes scanning anxiously for the red light of the trauma unit. A nurse holding a clipboard intercepted me. "This is a restricted area. Only authorized personnel are allowed." A surgical mask obscured most of her face, revealing only a pair of tired eyes that appraised my out-of-place business suit. I took a deep breath, trying to still the frantic hammering in my chest. "I'm here for Ethan Hayes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The hospital called me. I'm his wife." The nurse's movements paused. A flicker of strange confusion crossed her eyes. She glanced down at the registration form on her clipboard, then back up towards a set of swinging doors not far from me. Her voice was hesitant, uncertain. "Ethan Hayes' wife. But his wife and son are already here. They're with him now," the doctor said. "Only 2 family members are allowed inside. Are you sure you have the right person in that moment?" An invisible hammer struck the back of my neck. The blood that had been pounding in my veins from the frantic rush turned to ice. The cacophony of the ER, the frantic shouts, the squeal of gurney wheels retreated into a distant hum, leaving only the nurse's words echoing in my skull. "His wife and son are already here." I stood frozen, forgetting even to argue. As a lawyer who lived and breathed evidence and logic, my first reaction wasn't rage, but a profound sense of the absurd. Ethan and I had been married for 7 years. Where did he get another wife? We had no children. A plan still vaguely sketched out for the future. Where did he get a son? Excuse me, I said, my voice devoid of the hysterical outburst I'd seen so many times in court. Years of professional discipline had taught me an iron self-control. "I need to confirm something." My face was an unreadable mask as I sidestepped the nurse and walked directly to the swinging doors. Through the small wire-meshed window, I saw a scene that would be seared into my memory for the rest of my life. A scene that killed the last lingering warmth Maya Evans, held for my marriage. Ethan lay on the bed, his head wrapped in thick gauze, an oxygen mask covering his face. Though he was unconscious, the steady beep of the vital signs monitor indicated he was for the moment out of immediate danger. And beside his bed, clutching his hand, was a young woman who couldn't have been more than in her early 20s. Her tear-streaked face was a canvas of undisguised anguish and love. She wore a soft cream-colored cashmere sweater that made her look gentle and harmless. What made my pupils contract was the other arm, which was wrapped around a little boy of about 3. The child, clutching a transformer toy, stared blankly at the man on the bed, indistinctly murmuring, "Daddy," and my in-laws, the elderly couple who always complained of aching backs and sore knees whenever they visited, now stood alert and vigorous, hovering protectively around the young woman. My mother-in-law was even stroking her back with a practiced intimate gesture, as if comforting her own distraught daughter. What a picture of domestic bliss. A moving portrait of a loving family of 5. If I weren't his legal wife, the one who dutifully transferred a generous living allowance to his parents every month, I might have been moved to tears myself. Was I angry? Of course. Humiliated beyond measure. But I didn't push the door open. The Maya of 7 years ago, fresh out of law school, might have stormed in, ripped apart this hypocritical charade, slapped the woman, and demanded answers from my in-laws. But the Maya of today was a senior partner at a top law firm, a surgeon in the field of high net worth divorces. Professional instinct screamed at me. An impulsive act now would be pointless. It would tip them off, costing me the crucial window to gather evidence. My public outburst could even be used against me in the inevitable lawsuit. The nurse had said only 2 family members were allowed, so I would leave them to their tender moment. I slowly released my grip on the door handle. My nails had dug so deeply into my palm that it sent a sharp, stinging pain through my hand. But my expression quickly cooled, reverting to the inscrutable poker face I wore at the negotiation table. I turned and walked to the nearest fire escape stairwell. The motion sensor light was broken, leaving the space in a dim, murky gloom, illuminated only by the cold green glow of the emergency exit sign. I fumbled in my purse for a pack of slim cigarettes I kept for moments like this. The hospital was a no-smoking zone, but I needed the nicotine to quell the violent churning in my stomach. I lit one and took a long, deep drag. The acrid smoke filled my lungs, forcing a semblance of order back into my chaotic thoughts. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Ethan or his parents. I dialed a number I had saved long ago under the name Frank. Frank was a former NYPD detective who had taken an early retirement after an injury on the job. Now he worked as a private investigator, a go-to for lawyers like me who needed information gathered in the grey areas of the law. Maya. Calling me at this hour must be a big case. Frank's voice came through laced with his usual RY humor. I need you to look into someone for me, I said. My voice so calm it frightened even me. I stared at the glowing ember of my cigarette, my tone as detached as if I were outsourcing a routine corporate background check. Mount Sinai by Ethan Hayes' bedside. There's a woman, maybe 24 or 25, with a little boy about 3 years old. I want to know who she is, where she lives, and her relationship with Ethan by midnight tonight. Most importantly, I need you to get a hair or saliva sample from the child. I want a DNA test. There was a brief pause on the other end. Frank was sharp enough to hear the anomaly in my voice, but he was also a seasoned professional who knew not to ask questions he shouldn't. Got it. Send me a picture. You'll have the results tonight. You need me to keep an eye on Hayes. To know, I said with a cold laugh, stubbing out the half-SM smoked cigarette. I'll be keeping a very close eye on him myself. He wanted to play games. Fine. I'd direct a production he'd never forget. After hanging up, I didn't leave. I activated the voice recorder on my phone and pulled a pair of non-prescription glasses from my bag, using them to mask the lingering chill in my eyes. I looked at my reflection in the phone's dark screen. Practicing. I forced the sharp corners of my mouth to droop, rehearsing an expression of pure, unadulterated worry until the woman staring back at me looked like a helpless, distraught wife who had just learned her husband was in a terrible accident. From this moment on, Ethan Hayes was no longer my husband. He was my defendant. This marriage was no longer a safe harbor. It was a contract on the verge of being breached. And since he had torn up the spirit of the contract first, he couldn't blame me for liquidating his assets under the harshest possible terms. I pushed open the stairwell door and stepped back into the brightly lit chaos of the ER. I knew in that instant the real battle had just begun. I didn't rush into that room of feigned family joy. Instead, I sat on a cold metal bench in the waiting area, patiently biding my time. Half an hour later, I saw the young woman, the wife, emerge, still clutching the child as my in-laws gave her a series of last-minute whispered instructions. It seemed she was taking the boy home. As her back disappeared into the elevator, I straightened my slightly wrinkled blazer, picked up the briefcase that never left my side, and walked with steady, measured steps towards Ethan's room. By now, Ethan had regained consciousness and was weakly propped up against the pillows. My in-laws flanked him, whispering. The moment I appeared in the doorway, the expressions on their three faces were priceless. A Memmy-worthy tableau of shock and guilt. My mother-in-law's mouth hung open. My father-in-law's eyes darted away as he quickly hid his hands behind his back. And Ethan, my dear husband, was so startled that the heart monitor beside his bed spiked to 110. Maya, what are you doing here? Ethan's voice was as he forced a placating smile which immediately turned into a WR of pain. I rushed to his side, my eyes instantly welling with perfectly timed tears, my voice trembling with just the right amount of choked emotion. Ethan, you scared me to death. I was on my way home when the nurse called. My heart just stopped. How are you? Where does it hurt? What did the doctor say? As I spoke, I naturally took his hand, the same hand the other woman had been holding, and fought back a wave of nausea as I felt the cold sweat instantly bead in his palm. I'm fine. Just some cuts. A concussion. Nothing serious. Ethan stammered, clearly thrown off by my display of profound affection. His tense body relaxed slightly, but then he seemed to remember something and shot a nervous glance at his parents. My mother-in-law was quick to recover. She plastered on a fake smile and reached to pull my hand away from Ethan's. Oh Maya, dear, you're so busy with work. You didn't have to rush all the way over here. Your father and I have everything under control. You should go home and rest. Don't let this mess up that multimillion-dollar deal you're working on. In the past, I would have thought she was being considerate. Now, the dismissal in her tone was unmistakable. Mom, what are you talking about? I artfully dodged her hand, gripping Ethan's even tighter, even taking a moment to thoughtfully tuck in his blanket. Something this serious happened to Ethan. How could I not be here? No job is more important than my husband. By the way, I added, my tone shifting to one of casual curiosity. When I came in, I thought I saw a woman with a little boy leaving. Is she a relative? I don't think I've ever met her. The air in the room instantly froze. Ethan's pupils dilated. My father-in-law broke into a fit of coughing. The phony smile on my mother-in-law's face stiffened. Oh, that was my second cousin's daughter. She stammered. She was just passing by and heard about the accident. So she stopped in to say hello. Her little boy is so mischievous. Insisted on coming to see his uncle. Second cousin's daughter. I feigned surprise, raising an eyebrow. Which second cousin? I thought at our wedding you said your entire family had moved to New Zealand. When did she come back to the States? Oh, you and your bad memory, my mother-in-law said, a hint of frustrated anger in her voice. Her ability to lie on the spot was clearly not up to par. She's a distant cousin. You wouldn't know her. That's enough. Mom, Ethan interjected, clearly afraid of where my questions were leading. He looked at me with a weak expression. Honey, I'm thirsty. I immediately dropped the line of questioning and shifted into the role of the beautiful wife. Of course. Let me get you some water. As I turned my back, I slipped my hand into my briefcase and retrieved a micro-tracking device I had prepared long ago for a corporate espionage divorce case. It was no bigger than a dime, but packed with powerful features. Real-time GPS tracking and high-defin audio recording. As I helped Ethan sit up to drink, I used the motion of adjusting his pillow to slip the small black disc deep into the seam beneath it. A ghost in the machine. Next, I set my sights on his phone, which lay on the bedside table. Ethan, what did the police say about the accident? Have you gotten the dashcam footage yet? I asked casually, setting the water glass down. I need to contact the insurance company, and our corporate legal department needs to be kept in the loop. You being the CEO. An accident like this could affect the stock price. I need to mitigate any and all risks. The mention of stock prices and insurance claims immediately engaged Ethan's business instincts. But he still hesitated, his eyes flicking to his phone. The camera is probably still in the car. It was towed to the impound lot. I don't have the SD card. I looked him straight in the eye, my tone becoming serious. How could you let them tow the car with such a crucial piece of evidence inside? What if it gets lost or tampered with? Didn't your cousin help you get it? Overwhelmed by my professional authority, Ethan instinctively fumbled in his pocket and produced a small black SD card. Oh, right. Here it is. It was so chaotic. I just grabbed it. Here. You take it. I held out my hand, my expression leaving no room for refusal. I'll have our tech guys analyze the impact angle and see if we have any evidence of the other driver being at fault. That will give us the upper hand in determining liability. Ethan's hand tightened around the card. He knew, as I did, that it likely contained recordings of conversations he shouldn't have had conversations with her right before the crash. Honey, there might be some private conversations on there. You know how I am. Sometimes I'll be on the phone yelling at my subordinates. It's not pretty. He was making a last-ditch effort. I smiled at him, my eyes clear and direct, yet carrying an undeniable pressure. Ethan, I'm your wife and I'm your legal counsel. Before the law, there's nothing I can't know. Besides, if you don't give it to me, and the police extract the data and find something that puts you at a disadvantage, how am I supposed to do damage control? The company is in the middle of a crucial funding round. Any negative press could kill the whole deal. Tens of millions of dollars down the drain. Can you afford to take that responsibility? The words tens of millions were a sledgehammer striking his weakest point. His title as CEO of a tech company was built on a foundation of connections and resources I had spent years cultivating for him. He knew the importance of this funding round better than anyone. Faced with the fear of financial ruin, the secret of his affair seemed like a risk worth taking. He probably gambled that I would only watch the footage of the crash itself and not listen to the audio leading up to it. Fine. Take it. Just be careful with it. He finally conceded, releasing his grip. As I took the still warm SD card, I knew I had him by the throat. Don't worry, I said, placing the card in a locked compartment of my briefcase. The sound of the zipper was crisp and satisfying, like the cocking of a hunting rifle. I'll take very good care of it. After settling Ethan in, I didn't linger. Citing the need to handle insurance and company matters, I left the hospital room. The moment I was back in my car, the gentle doting wife vanished, replaced by an ice-cold Maya Evans. I didn't start the engine. I took out my laptop, inserted the SD card into a reader, and opened the video files. They were organized by time. I scrolled directly to the half hour before the accident. The camera only captured the view outside the car, but the audio from inside was chillingly clear. Honey, our son has gotten taller again. His preschool teacher says he's so smart. The young woman's voice, cloyingly sweet, Cooped. Of course he is. Look who his father is. Ethan's voice, smug and self-satisfied, replied. He's definitely an upgrade from anything that workaholic at home could produce. The slimy undertone made my stomach turn. Lily, don't you worry. As soon as this funding round closes, I'm signing the deed to the West Village townhouse over to you. A little birthday present for our boy. Really? But what about your wife? She's a high-powered lawyer. Won't she find out? Lawyer, so what? He scoffed. She acts all tough and savvy at the office. But at home she's a fool. I just have to be nice to her. Have my parents play along. And she doesn't suspect a thing. Besides, our son is the true heir to the Hayes family. With her personality, if she ever found out I had a son, she'd probably beg me to bring him home to raise. Crash. The screech of tires and the sickening crunch of metal followed immediately. The video feed spun violently before cutting to black. I snapped the laptop shut. The screen's light vanished, plunging the car into darkness, my face a mask in the shadows. So that was it. While I was running myself ragged for this family, for his company, whining and dining investors until I developed a stomach ulcer, they were all laughing behind my back, calling me a fool. I wasn't just their ATM. I was a placeholder. A defective baby-making machine. Beg him to bring the bastard home. I stared into the darkness and laughed. A cold, humorless sound. No tears fell. The fire inside me had burned away everything, leaving only the scorched, merciless earth of pure resolve. Ethan Hayes, if you want your son and your tens of millions so badly, then I will make sure you get exactly what you deserve. But the price will be one you can never afford to pay. The next morning, armed with a stack of documents I had spent all night drafting, I reappeared in Ethan's hospital room. After a night of observation, the doctors had delivered a grim update. While Ethan's condition was stable, a hematoma in his skull was pressing on a nerve. He needed emergency surgery, a craniotomy to remove it. Without it, he faced the risk of blindness or even partial paralysis. For a man in the prime of his life and terrified of his own mortality, the news was a death sentence. When I entered, he was lying in bed, his face ashen. My in-laws were wiping away tears, clearly shaken by the pre-op consultation. Maya, you're here. Seeing me was like seeing a lifeline. Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for mine. The doctor said, a craniotomy. What if I don't make it off the table? I walked over and gently took his hand, the warmth of my palm seeming to calm him slightly. I had chosen a tailored grey pants suit for the day, an outfit that projected competence and reliability. Don't think like that. Medical technology is very advanced now. This is a routine procedure. I soothed, my eyes full of concern. Besides, I've already contacted the best neurosurgeon in the state to perform the surgery. You just rest. You'll wake up and it will all be over. Ethan nodded, but the fear in his eyes remained. However, Ethan, I said, my tone shifting to a more serious note, as your wife and the company's legal counsel, there are certain things I must, for your sake, take care of before the surgery. The risk may be small, but we can't afford even a 1 in a million chance of an accident. The company is at a critical stage with the funding round. If investors hear you're undergoing brain surgery, they might question the company's stability. They could even pull out. The words pull out immediately snapped Ethan to attention. Then what do? We can't let them pull out. Which is why we need to prepare 2 things. I said, pulling the prepared documents from my briefcase and spreading them out on the bedside table. First, this is a durable power of attorney. It grants me full authority over the company's operations while you're in surgery and recovery, including financial approvals and personnel decisions. This way, even if you're away from the office for a while, The investors will see that I'm in charge, and their confidence will remain. This document, while appearing reasonable, effectively handed me the keys to his kingdom. Ethan hesitated, his eyes scanning the dense legal text. Financial authority. 2. Ethan. Don't you trust me? I let a flicker of hurt cross my face. My eyes welling up slightly. All these years. How much of my own family money have I poured into this company? If you don't think I'm trustworthy, then I won't sign it. We can just wait for the investors to do their due diligence and find a company with a headless CEO. I made a show of gathering the papers. No, honey. That's not what I meant. Ethan panicked. Quickly. Pressing his hand down on the documents. I'll sign. Of course I trust you. You're the closest person I have. Who else would I trust? He shakily signed his name. That's my husband, I said, a barely perceptible smirk touching my lips before I produced the second set of documents. This second one is an asset protection agreement just in case of an accident. You know, business is risky. If, and I'm just saying if, something goes wrong with the surgery or if the company's creditors call in their loans early because of your health, we need a firewall between our personal assets and the company's debts. The document was titled A Supplemental Agreement on Marital Assets and Debt Allocation. The name sounded like it was protecting our family, but the core clauses within were a labyrinth of legal jargon I had meticulously designed. In essence, it assigned all of the company's high-risk, undisclosed debts, some of which were bridge loans Ethan had secretly taken out to support his mistress to him personally. Simultaneously, it transferred our prime real estate and liquid assets into my name under the guise of protective custody to shield them from creditors. To a legal layman like Ethan, disoriented and terrified, these complex clauses were gibberish. He only understood the surface-level explanation I gave him. Risk isolation. Protecting his family. This transfers the house to you. Ethan, though groggy, was still sharp when it came to real estate. It's not a transfer. It's a temporary isolation under my name, I explained patiently, my gaze so sincere it bordered on pleading. Once you've recovered and the company is stable, we can transfer it back anytime. Ethan, this is to preserve our family's foundation. If the company goes bankrupt, at least we'll still have a home and money for your medical care. Right. My mother-in-law, who had been listening without full comprehension, chimed in at the mention of saving the house. Your son, Maya, is right. That debt isolation thing sounds reliable. We can't have the company's problems lead to our house being taken away. With the divine intervention of his mother and the looming fear of the operating table, Ethan's final defenses crumbled. He probably figured that as long as he was alive and I still loved him, it didn't matter whose name was on the deed. Okay. I'll sign. Ethan took the pen and signed his name with a flourish, even adding a thumbprint. Seeing the bright red ink on the page, the heavy stone in my chest finally dropped. In that moment, he hadn't just signed a few pieces of paper, he had signed away his life. From now on, whether he lived or died, recovered, or was permanently disabled, he was, in the eyes of the law, a destitute man, saddled with enormous debt, stripped of his core assets. You're so brave, my love. Don't worry, I've got everything under control now, I said, gathering the documents and carefully placing them in my briefcase. I leaned down and pressed a kiss, cold as the grave, on his pale forehead. I will take care of our home for you. And I will take care of everyone. As I walked out of the room, I ran into the lead surgeon. Miss Evans. How is the patient's mood? He asked. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. He's very stable, I replied with a serene smile, my fingers tracing the grain of my leather briefcase. Full of hope for the future. Please. Doctor, do your absolute best. After all, he still has a lot of debts to pay. The doctor looked at me puzzled, as if he hadn't quite heard the last part of my sentence. I didn't explain. I walked away, my heels clicking down the long, winding hospital corridor, a path filled with uncertainty and hidden turns. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Frank. Got a match on the woman in the photo. Name's Lily Miller. Lives at a townhouse in the West Village property Ethan Hayes bought in cash last year. Got the DNA sample. The kid took a fall in the hallway. Had a nose Davis. I have the tissue. Sent it to the lab for a rush job. Results tomorrow. The West Village. My eyes went cold. That was the exact neighborhood I had wanted to buy in for our 10th anniversary. A wish Ethan had dismissed, claiming the company was too cash-strapped. Excellent. Ethan, the surprises you have for me just keep getting bigger. In that case, I must prepare a gift for you of equal weight. Ethan's surgery was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. The next day, the specialist I had hired at great expense was leading the procedure. In the sterile white hallway outside the operating room, I played my part, standing anxiously alongside my overwrought in-laws. When the green light above the door finally lit up and the surgeon emerged to announce that the operation was a success and Ethan was out of danger, my mother-in-law clutched her chest and theatrically thanked God. Then she grabbed my arm, her voice dripping with condescension disguised as gratitude. "Oh Maya, we were so lucky to have you this time. For Ethan to have married such a capable wife. It must be a blessing from God." I smiled and gently pulled my hand away, adjusting my glasses. "Mom, it was my duty. But the surgery is just the first step. The recovery will be long and arduous. The costs will not be insignificant. We should all be prepared." My words were a splash of cold water, instantly extinguishing the nent relief on my in-laws' faces. They exchanged a look, quickly changed the subject to what kind of soup would be best for his recovery, and conveniently avoided any further discussion of money. I didn't call them out on their charade because an hour earlier, while waiting in the coffee shop downstairs, an encrypted file from Frank had arrived, giving me a new precise to the penny valuation of my marriage and of Ethan Hayes himself. The file contained a detailed investigation report. Lily Miller, 24 years old, joined Ethan's company as an intern 3 years ago, quit 6 months later, and had no subsequent employment record. Yet she was the registered owner of a $7 million townhouse in the West Village purchased in cash and a white Porsche Cayenne. The 3-year-old boy, Leo Hayes, had a DNA report that was clear and unequivocal, a 99.99% probability of being Ethan's biological son. But it was the last page of the report that made my blood run cold and my fingertips go numb. It was a scanned copy of an irrevocable life insurance trust, an ILIT established 2 years prior. The Goethe was Ethan Hayes. The sole beneficiary was Leo Hayes. The total value of the trust was $10 million, supplemented by a high-value critical illness and accident insurance policy. The terms explicitly stated that in the event of Ethan's death or incapacitation, the entire sum would be transferred directly by the trustee to Leo's legal guardian, Lily Miller, to ensure the future well-being of mother and child. $10 million. I stared at the glaring number on the screen, the coffee cup in my hand trembling uncontrollably. I remembered that time 2 years ago with perfect clarity. It was the most difficult period of our Series B funding round. To secure a critical bridge loan, I had not only mortgaged the premarital apartment my parents left me, but I had also smoothed investors, drinking until I ended up with a B. Davising stomach ulcer and signed a high-stakes gambling contract with draconian terms. And my husband, my supposed partner in arms, had quietly siphoned off $10 million from the company to build an unbreakable golden cradle for his illegitimate son. He had already prepared a foolproof exit strategy for himself and his new family, regardless of whether the company survived or failed. Regardless of what happened to me. His long-suffering wife. His precious son would be safe, inheriting a massive fortune. The depth of this calculation, this cold-blooded scheming, was more chilling than the filth on the dashcam recording. I slowly closed my laptop. The rage that had been boiling in my chest was forced down, compressed into a calm that was almost cruel. If you value your son and his inheritance so much, Ethan, then I will let you watch with your own 2 eyes as your financial empire crumbles. And we will see just how much your so-called true love and blood ties are really worth. Ethan was moved to a VIP room with 2 4-hour care, the daily cost of which ran into 5 figures. I didn't make my move immediately, patiently continuing my role as the devoted wife. It wasn't until the 3rd day after his surgery, when the anesthesia had completely worn off and his mind was clear, that I chose a moment when both his parents and Lily Miller were visiting to make my entrance. The moment Lily saw me, a flash of provocation crossed her eyes, quickly replaced by a look of frail innocence. She timidly addressed me. "Miss Evans." "That's Mrs. Hayes to you." "Miss Miller," I corrected with a smile, my gaze shifting past her to the pale figure on the bed. "Ethan, how are you feeling? Okay?" "Just a headache," he mumbled, his voice still weak. "A headache is good. It means your brain is still working." I placed my briefcase on the bedside table with a soft click, drawing everyone's attention. "Maya, what are you up to?" my mother-in-law asked, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, her eyes wary. I ignored her, pulling a hospital bill from my briefcase and placing it gently on Ethan's blanket. "Ethan, this is the itemized bill for all expenses since you were admitted. The total comes to $150,000. I've had the company's finance department advance the payment. But starting tomorrow, I'm afraid you'll have to endure a little hardship." "Hardship? What do you mean?" Ethan frowned. "I mean, the VIP room is too expensive, and the company's current financial situation can no longer support it." I pulled over a chair, sat down, and crossed my legs. My posture elegant, but my words were as cold as a scalpel. "I've spoken with the hospital. Starting tomorrow, we'll move you to a standard 3-person room. It might be a bit noisier, but it will cut the cost by 90%. For our debt-ridden company, that is crucial." "Debt-ridden?" Ethan's voice shot up, the movement causing him to hiss in pain. "What are you talking about? Last month's financial report showed a profit of over $500,000. How can we be drowning in debt? That was last month." I opened my briefcase again and produced another file, a brand new financial statement filled with red ink that I had directed the CFO to prepare overnight the day of your accident. "Our largest client, citing your health and potential operational risks, unilaterally terminated their contract and is demanding triple the penalty fee for breach of contract. Simultaneously, the bank caught wind of the situation and is calling in a $10 million loan that was about to mature. Simply put, Ethan, we're bankrupt." The financial report was flawless. Every number defensible. Every loss logically explained. For a patient who had just undergone brain surgery, whose cognitive abilities were severely impaired, it was a death sentence. Impossible. "That's absolutely impossible." Ethan's face went white, his breathing becoming ragged. "You're lying to me. Maya, are you playing some kind of sick joke? Do I look like I'm joking?" I held the report up for him to see, pointing to the staggering total debt figure. "The company account has less than $20,000 left. We can't even make payroll next month. The hospital bill I paid was from my personal savings. But my money isn't endless. It will run out." His parents and Lily Miller were stunned into silence. Lily, in particular, who had been wearing a faintly triumphant expression, now looked utterly horrified. How can this be? Ethan, you said the company was about to close its funding round. You said you were going to buy a mansion for me and our son. She rushed to the bedside, grabbing his arm, her voice shrill. My mother-in-law finally snapped out of it, pointing an accusing finger at me. Maya Evans. What have you done? Did you take advantage of my son's illness to drain the company's accounts and run? I knew a scheming woman like you couldn't be trusted. Mother. I suggest you watch your tone, I said, my gaze cold. Every transaction is on the books. Our CFO, a man I personally headhunted for his discretion and loyalty, is fiercely protective of the company's stability. He can attest to everything. If you suspect me of embezzlement, feel free to call the police and have the SEC investigate. But I should remind you, once an investigation is launched, the company's accounts will be frozen immediately. At that point, forget a VIP room. We might have to stop his basic medication. My mother-in-law choked on her words. She wouldn't dare call the police. She knew better than anyone how many of the family's expenses over the years wouldn't stand up to scrutiny. Enough. Be quiet. Ethan rasped, breaking into a violent coughing fit. He looked at me, his eyes filled with suspicion. Maya, I don't believe you. Call the CFO. I want to speak to him myself. Of course. I had anticipated this. In front of all of them, I dialed our CFO, Mr. Davis, and put the call on speaker. Mr. Davis was a man I had personally headhunted from a small law firm. He was fiercely loyal and discreet. Following my earlier instructions, he proceeded to describe the company's dire situation in a tone of utter despair, embellishing the details, his every figure matching my report perfectly. After the call ended, a dead silence fell over the room. Ethan deflated completely, his eyes vacant as he stared at the ceiling. All the life drained out of him. His pride, his plans. Everything was built on the company's success. Now that the foundation was crumbling, his promises to Lily and her son had become worthless checks. No, it can't be, Lily muttered to herself, her face even paler than Ethan's. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. A bankrupt, potentially paralyzed Ethan. What use was he to her now, looking at their miserable, deserted state? I felt no pity, only a grim sense of satisfaction. And this was just the beginning. The $10 million insurance policy he had set up for his son was about to become the death knell for him and his parasitic family. After confirming the company's bankruptcy, Ethan sank into a state of near catatonic depression. The VIP room was no longer an option. The next morning, under the curious gazes of other patients and their families, he was wheeled from his luxurious top-floor suite down to the noisiest three-bed ward at the end of the hall. His new roommates were an elderly stroke victim who slurred his words and a construction worker with a broken leg who moaned in pain all night. The air was a nauseating mix of antiseptic, sweat, and cheap cafeteria food, a world away from the fresh lies that had adorned his VIP room daily. A man like Ethan, accustomed to luxury, couldn't tolerate such an environment. In a single morning, he called me no fewer than 10 times, driven mad by the old man's snoring and the orderly's rough handling, begging me to move him back. Maya, honey, I'm begging you. I can't last another day here. Please figure something out. Sell my car. Just get me back into a private room, he pleaded, his voice cracking with tears. Ethan, this is not the time to be selfish, I replied, my voice flat. I was sitting in my spacious, sunlit office reviewing a new case file. Your car is already listed on AutoTrader, but it takes time to sell. The company's creditors are at our door every day. It wasn't easy for me to get away to even visit you today. You'll have to endure it a little longer. As soon as I can scrape some money together. I need to at least prepay for your physical therapy. While I spoke of scraping money together, I was actually instructing my assistant to file a prejudgment read of attachment with the court on my behalf. The target of the attachment was Ethan Hayes himself. After hanging up, I took a sip of my iced Americano. The bitter taste sharpened my focus. I knew that simply downgrading his living conditions wasn't enough to break them. The real killer blow had to be a master stroke. That afternoon, instead of visiting the hospital, I had a demand letter sent to Ethan by courier. The sender was my law firm. The recipient was Ethan Hayes. The content of the letter was simple yet vicious. As a creditor, I was demanding the repayment of a joint marital debt totaling $1 million. The debt, of course, was fictitious. But I held in my possession a legally valid promissory note signed by Ethan himself. It was one of several blank notes I had him sign back when we were first starting the company to facilitate capital flow. He had thought nothing of it at the time, but my professional habits had led me to keep them perfectly preserved. Now, these forgotten scraps of paper had become my sharpest weapons. The letter was a bombshell that detonated in that small 3-bed ward. Almost at the same moment the courier received a signature confirmation. My phone rang. It was Lily. She had clearly seen the letter. The timid act was gone, replaced by pure fury. Maya Evans. What the hell are you trying to do? The company is bankrupt. And now you're forcing Ethan to pay you. Are you trying to kill him, Miss Miller? I believe you're mistaken about a few things, I said, leaning back in my comfortable ergonomic chair and slowly twirling a fountain pen. First, this is a debt matter between my husband and me. It has nothing to do with an outsider like you. Second, business is business. Even between spouses. This $1 million was my premarital personal asset. I lent it to the company for cash flow. Now that the company is bankrupt, as a creditor, it is reasonable, logical, and legal for me to demand repayment from the company's legal representative. My husband. You're shameless. Lily sputtered at a loss for words. Ethan is lying in a hospital bed. He can barely move. Where do you expect him to get $1 million? Doesn't he still own a townhouse in the West Village? I said with a soft laugh, finally revealing my true objective. As I understand it, the market value of that property is around $7 million. More than enough to cover this debt. Of course, if you, Miss Miller, are willing to pay on his behalf, I have no objection. The other end of the line went silent. The West Village townhouse was Lily's lifeline. The trophy she had stolen from me. Forcing her to give it up was like asking for her life. Maya Evans. Don't push me too far. After a long pause, Lily's voice turned venomous. Do you really think I don't know what you're up to? You're just jealous that Ethan loves me. Jealous that I gave him a son, let me tell you. Don't even think about using these cheap tricks to drive us away. I'm going to take my son to the hospital right now and tell everyone that I am the one who secured the Hayes family line. And you're just a barren old woman squatting in a position you don't deserve. Oh. Really, I was not angered in the slightest. In fact, I raised my eyebrows with interest. You are more than welcome to do so. But a friendly reminder. According to state law, cohabitating and having a child with another person while in a legally recognized marriage, if the circumstances are serious enough, can constitute bigamy. That's a felony. You go to prison for that. A young, beautiful woman like yourself, Miss Miller. I'm sure you wouldn't want to spend your best years behind bars. Would you? You're bluffing. Lily's confidence was clearly shaken. You can consult a lawyer. Oh. Right. Legal fees aren't cheap. I'm not sure you have the disposable income for that at the moment. I added casually before hanging up. I knew her type. All bark. No bite. She acted tough. But what she feared most was losing everything she had. She wouldn't dare make a scene because if she did, she could end up with nothing and a criminal record to boot. True to form, she didn't call back to harass me. Instead, she chose another tactic. A personal appeal with the child as a prop. That evening, just as I got home, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Lily holding Leo, her face a mask of weary desperation. She had deliberately changed into a faded t-shirt and left her hair unkempt. The perfect picture of a single mother crushed by life. I opened the door but didn't invite her in, leaning against the door frame and looking at her coldly. "Miss Evans." "No. Mrs. Hayes," she began, tears already streaming down her face. "I'm begging you." She pushed the child forward. "Look at Leo. He's only 3. He can't live without a father. And he can't live without a home. The West Village house. Ethan promised it to him. Please have mercy. Let us go." As she spoke, she pinched the child's arm. Leo immediately burst into tears. A heart-wrenching wail that drew the attention of my neighbors. A brilliant tactic. A typical wife faced with this scene would have either softened or exploded with rage. But I was not a typical wife. I smiled, retrieved a lollipop from the shoe cabinet, and knelt down in front of Leo. "Hey, little guy, don't cry," I said gently, offering him the candy. "Here, have a treat. Can you tell me, is your daddy's name Ethan Hayes? Did your daddy promise you a big airplane and a big house?" The innocent child, distracted by the candy, stopped crying and mumbled, "Daddy, Daddy." By Leo. "Big plane. Good boy." I patted his head, then stood up, slipping the still recording phone back into my pocket. The smile vanished from my face, replaced by an icy indifference. "Lily Miller, take your child and get the hell away from my door immediately," I said, my voice low, but carrying an undeniable authority. "If you don't, I will call the police right now and report you for harassment for bringing your illegitimate child to my home. The conversation you just had with your son has been recorded. It will serve as direct evidence of Ethan's marital affair and his illegal promise to gift you significant assets. Who do you think a judge will believe, a crying mistress or a crystal-clear audio recording?" Lily's face went white. She had never imagined I would be so calculating as to use a 3-year-old child. She stumbled backward, clutching the boy, her eyes filled with fear and hatred. "Maya Evans, you are truly evil. I learned from the best," I said, leaning against the door and watching her. Davis. I closed the door, shutting out the world. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows in my living room and looked out at the glittering city lights. I felt no victor's joy. This was a war with no winners. All I was doing was standing amidst the wreckage, calmly assessing the damage, and then one by one, burying the people who had caused it under my relentless assault. Ethan's psychological defenses quickly crumbled. He abandoned his dream of returning to the VIP suite and began to actively cooperate with his treatment, desperate to recover and get back to the office to salvage his empire. Half a month later, he had miraculously regained most of his mobility. Though he walked with a slight limp, he could at least manage his daily life. At his insistent request, the hospital approved his discharge. The day he was released, I went to pick him up. His parents and Lily were nowhere in sight, likely too intimidated by my previous maneuvers to show their faces. In the car, Ethan was unusually quiet. He stared out the window at the passing city streets, the once dashing tech CEO now looking like a defeated rooster, his face pale and etched with an anxiety he couldn't hide. "Maya," he said suddenly, his voice. "The company, is it really that bad? Worse than you can imagine," I said, my eyes fixed on the road. "Another supplier showed up yesterday demanding payment. They nearly blocked the entrance. The bank calls a dozen times a day. Ethan. We're not just bankrupt. We're drowning in debt. And our house? He finally asked, his voice trembling. The one we live in now, being a marital asset, has been frozen by the court. It could be auctioned off to pay debts at any moment. As for the one your parents are in, although it's in your name, it's also subject to seizure. I calmly recited the facts, each one a nail in his coffin. Ethan's breathing grew heavy. He closed his eyes and leaned back against the seat, beads of cold sweat forming on his forehead. When we got home, the familiar, immaculate living room offered no comfort. It felt like a cage awaiting its final seal. I didn't give him much time to wallow. That evening, I personally cooked a lavish-looking meal. Then, right in front of him, I called my mother-in-law. Mom, Ethan was discharged today. He's recovering well. I've made dinner. Why don't you and Dad come over? It's been a while since we all got together. Oh, and bring Miss Miller along. She's worked so hard lately. We should thank her for taking care of him. My mother-in-law was audibly stunned, clearly not expecting me to invite her son's mistress to our home. Ethan stared at me in shock, his mouth open. But he couldn't find the words. Maya. Ethan. Don't overthink it, I said, hanging up and offering him a gentle smile. Things have come to this. There's no point in blaming each other. The most important thing now is for our family to unite and figure out a way through this. Miss Miller is a part of your life. She gave you a son. So she's a part of this family now. There's no reason we can't all sit down together. My magnanimity and understanding seemed to melt the suspicion in his eyes. He probably thought reality had finally broken me, that I was ready to accept Lily and her son to weather the storm with him. An hour later, my in-laws arrived with a visibly anxious Lily in tow. She was dressed down in a simple outfit, wearing no makeup, looking like a naive college student. A stark contrast to the woman who had made a scene at my door. The atmosphere at the dinner table was excruciatingly awkward, but I acted as if nothing was wrong, enthusiastically serving everyone, making small talk, as if we were a truly harmonious family. Mom, Dad, eat up. We have you to thank for Ethan's recovery. And Lily, please make yourself at home. You're young. You need your nutrients. The more gracious I was, the more uncomfortable they became. The meal was tasteless. A trial by fire. Finally, as dinner was winding down, I put down my chopsticks and sighed softly. Ethan. Mom. Dad. I looked around the table, my gaze finally settling on Ethan. I invited everyone here today, not just to celebrate Ethan's return, but because there's something important I need to discuss. Everyone froze, their eyes fixed on me. You all know the company's situation. We're tens of millions in debt. If we don't do something, we'll lose not just the company, but this house, too. Our entire family, young and old, will be out on the street. I watched their faces. Fear was written all over my in-laws' expressions. Lily instinctively clenched her fists. So, is there a way? My father-in-law asked, his voice shaking. There is one way, I said, pausing to let the bait sink in. But it will require all of us to work together. I've consulted with a top financial restructuring advisor. He said that while our company is in debt, our core technology and market channels are still valuable. If we can secure a new round of funding and hold on to our current clients, there's a chance we can turn things around. I've already contacted an investment firm that is willing to take us on. But they have one condition. What condition? Ethan demanded, grasping at the last straw. They require sufficient collateral. I looked at him, enunciating each word carefully. In other words, We need to mortgage all our real estate, this house and the one your parents are living in, to the bank and use the loan as startup capital for the company's restructuring. What, mortgage the house? My mother-in-law shrieked. Absolutely not. What if the company still fails? We'll have nowhere to live. Mom, it's not a matter of what if anymore. I explained patiently. We have no other options. If we don't mortgage the house, we'll be kicked out immediately. If we do, we at least have a fighting chance. It was a simple equation. Ethan fell into deep thought. He was a businessman. He understood risk and reward. Mortgaging the houses was a huge gamble, but it was his only shot at a comeback. Maya, are you sure you can get the investment? He asked. I've already negotiated the terms. They're just waiting for our mortgage loan to be approved. I replied, my voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. Silence fell over the table again. Mortgaging the houses meant they would all be tied to me on this sinking ship. We would sink or swim together. I watched the play of emotions on their faces. My in-laws' greed and fear, Ethan's desperation and ambition, and the calculating glint in Lily Miller's eyes. I knew my poison had taken hold. This fatal family dinner wasn't about reconciliation. It was about dragging all of them into the abyss I had so carefully designed. I didn't just want them to lose their money. I wanted them to reveal their truest, ugliest selves in this high-stakes game. And I would be the only dealer at the table, watching coldly as they gambled their way to ruin. After that fateful family dinner, an unprecedented anxiety settled over the Hayes household. The prospect of mortgaging their properties hung over them like the sword of Damocles, robbing them of stay-visp. I didn't press the issue, giving them ample time to stew. Meanwhile, I had Mr. Davis at the company continued to play the part of a failing business. He deliberately delayed payments to a couple of small vendors, creating the illusion of a severe cash flow problem. He even hired a few trusted friends to pose as creditors who showed up at the company building every day holding signs that read, Ethan Hayes, pay your debts. Photos of these staged protests were accidentally leaked to my in-laws' relatives. Soon, rumors of the Hayes family's bankruptcy spread like wildfire. My in-laws couldn't even go grocery shopping without feeling the pitying stares of their neighbors. Distant relatives who used to fawn over them now wouldn't even answer their calls. The humiliation of falling from grace was for them even more unbearable than the financial pressure. Finally, on the fifth night, Ethan came to me. He looked haggard, his eyes sunken, his hair a mess. A far cry from the confident executive he once was. He slumped onto the sofa opposite me, running his hands through his hair in frustration. That matter. The mortgage. Have you thought about it? It's not about what I think. It's about what all of you think. I said, putting down the law journal I was reading and looking at him calmly. The house is our joint property. We can't do it without everyone's consent. And once we do, there's no turning back. I know there's no turning back. He snapped, his eyes bloodshot. I've thought about it for days. That company is my life's work. I can't just watch it die. Maya, let's take the gamble. If we can turn this around, I promise I will treat you right from now on. I'll devote myself to our family. His solemn vow was laughable. A man's promise, especially one made at his lowest point, is the cheapest currency in the world. Can you convince your parents? I asked. I'll try my best, he said, his lack of confidence evident. The next day, Ethan convened another family council. It quickly reached a stalemate. My mother-in-law wailed, clinging to a pillar in the living room, declaring that the house was her life, and anyone who wanted to mortgage it would have to do so over her dead body. My father-in-law sighed, chain smoking, saying nothing. Ethan pleaded until he was horsero, but his parents wouldn't budge. Just then, Lily, who had been silent, spoke up. "Mom, Dad," she said, standing up and walking over to the elderly couple, her eyes red-rimmed. "I know you're reluctant. I am too. But if we don't think about ourselves, we have to think about Leo. He's so young. If the company is gone, how will he go to college? Get married? Are we going to make him live under a bridge with us?" Her words struck their weakest point. Their precious grandson. Besides, she continued, turning to Ethan, her eyes full of adoration, "I believe in Ethan's ability. This is just a temporary setback. If we give him a chance, he can make a comeback. He can earn back 10 houses. Not just one. What we need to do now is support him." Right, her speech was a masterful blend of emotional appeal and grand promises. My in-laws' firm stance began to waver. I sat on the sidelines, a cold observer of Lily's brilliant performance. I knew she was no fool. She wanted Ethan to succeed more than anyone. Only when Ethan had money could she and her son continue their lavish lifestyle, so she would do everything in her power to make this happen. And I was using her ambition to my own advantage. Under Lily's persuasion and Ethan's renewed promises, my in-laws finally reluctantly agreed. But it wasn't that simple. Since everyone is in agreement, let's discuss the specifics. I interjected, steering the conversation to my true purpose: to reassure the investors and to clarify our internal roles and responsibilities. We need to sign a family asset restructuring and nominee shareholding agreement. I distributed the pre-prepared documents. This agreement has 2 main points. I explained. First, we will jointly mortgage both houses and the loan will be injected into the company to pay off debts and resume operations. Second, for operational convenience and to satisfy the investors' due diligence, we need to appoint one person as the nominee shareholder during the restructuring period. This means that legally the company will be in one person's name, creating a clear ownership structure that is conducive to fundraising. Nominee shareholder. Who will it be? My mother-in-law asked wearily. Logically, it should be Ethan as the company's founder. However, I glanced at Ethan and sighed. His health has not fully recovered, and given the company's recent troubles under his leadership, the investors have lost confidence in him. So, he's not an option. Ethan's face palled. But he couldn't argue. Then, I'll do it. My mother-in-law immediately volunteered. I'm his mother. It's only right. Mother, you don't understand business operations or finance. The investors would never approve you, I said with a smile, shutting her down. At this, Lily's eyes lit up. She saw her chance to step into the spotlight and seize control of the Hayes family fortune. What about me? She asked tentatively. I may be young, but I've worked at the company before. I understand the business and I'm Leo's mother. Everything I do will be for the good of the company, for this family. Ethan looked at Lily, then at me, seemingly swayed. In his mind, having Lily as the nominee was easier to control than a powerful wife like me. Maya, what do you think? He asked. I feigned contemplation. Having Lily as the nominee, it's not out of the question. She's young, passionate, and a mother. It could show the investors our determination to succeed. But I added, my tone serious. Once this agreement is signed legally, all of the company's assets and debts will be in her name alone. The risk is not insignificant. I deliberately emphasize the word debts. But Lily, her head filled with dreams of becoming the company's matriarch, was deaf to my warning. To her, the debts were temporary. Once the funding came through, she would be a legitimate wealthy madam. I'm not afraid of the risk, she declared, her face set with determination. For Ethan, for Leo, for this family, I am willing to bear it all. What a brave, selfless woman. I scoffed internally. The fish had taken the bait. The nominee agreement I had drafted was a masterpiece of deception. On the surface, it gave her control. But every clause was a trap. The most important one, buried in complex legal jargon, stipulated that as the nominee shareholder, she would bear unlimited personal liability for all new debts incurred by the company during the restructuring. In other words, once she signed, every loan I took out in the company's name would ultimately be her responsibility. Well, if Lily is willing to take on such a responsibility, then I have no objections, I said with a pleased smile, handing her the pen. We're counting on you. Under the envious gaze of my in-laws and the hopeful eyes of Ethan, Lily, her hand trembling with excitement, signed her name on the document that would ruin her life. In that moment, I could almost hear the tightening of a noose. And she, the woman who thought she had seized control of her destiny, was still basking in the glow of her imagined future glory. Once Lily signed the fatal nominee agreement, I executed the so-called asset restructuring plan with breathtaking efficiency. The two houses were quickly mortgaged to a bank, which was in fact a shell corporation I controlled through an offshore trust. The entire loan process was a simple left-hand transfer of funds. A massive sum of money was injected into the company's account, creating the illusion of a prosperous cash flow. Overdue payments to suppliers were settled. The hired creditors disappeared. I even gave all employees a symbolic raise to boost morale. To Ethan and Lily, these were all signs of the company's miraculous revival. Ethan's health improved daily. He started wearing expensive tailored suits again, swanning around the office. Although Lily was the nominee shareholder, I still held the actual operational control through the power of attorney. But to plate him, I would consult him on minor decisions. This restored sense of importance quickly inflated his ego. He began to believe the past was just a fluke. With him at the helm, the Hayes family would soon return to its former glory. Lily, meanwhile, was fully immersed in her role as the wealthy matriarch. She fired the old housekeeper and hired a more subservient Filipino couple. Her afternoons were spent having tea with newly acquired socialite friends, shopping at the most exclusive boutiques, and posting photos of her hauls on social media with captions like, "Living the good life." She even started meddling in company affairs, once trying to force the marketing department to adopt a deeply flawed promotional plan created by a friend's agency. I didn't stop her. I encouraged her. The deeper she waded in, the more entangled she would become in the web I was weaving. My in-laws also shed their gloom, resuming their smug, self-satisfied demeanor. They boasted to relatives that while I was a capable daughter-in-law, in the end, it was their family's heir and the woman who produced him that truly mattered. Watching this family revel in their delusion, I felt like I was watching a bad comedy. They were frogs in a pot of slowly heating water, completely oblivious to the rising temperature. The real crisis always strikes when one is most complacent. One afternoon, as I was handling an offshore asset transfer, Ethan stormed into my office, slamming a bank statement on my desk. "Maya Evans, explain this," he roared, pointing at a figure on the statement, his whole body trembling with rage. "Why is my offshore account frozen? What happened to the $5 million in it?" This was his secret slush fund. Money he had siphoned off over the years through shady deals. He had likely intended to move it to a safer location now that the company was recovering, only to find I had beaten him to it. I looked up, my expression calm. "I froze it," I said simply. "On what grounds?" he bellowed. "On the grounds that I am your legal wife, that this money is a joint marital asset, and most importantly, that I am currently the company's legal representative," I said, rising from my chair and walking towards him. My height gave me an advantage, allowing me to look down on him. "Ethan, after your accident, I audited the company's books. I discovered that significant sums of money had been funneled into various undisclosed offshore accounts, including this one. As the person in charge of the company, it is my duty to recover any and all potentially embezzled corporate assets. You're lying. That's my personal money, he sputtered. Is it? I retrieved another file from my drawer and placed it in front of him. This is a cash flow audit conducted by an international accounting firm. It clearly traces every dollar from the company's project funds through a series of sham transactions into your personal account. In legal terms, Ethan, this is called corporate embezzlement. It's a felony. Ethan stared at the damningly detailed report, the color draining from his face. You investigated me, he whispered, his voice laced with fear. I didn't investigate you. I saved the company. I saved this family, I said, returning to my desk. My tone softened slightly, but it carried an irresistible pressure. You have two options. 1. You hand over all the assets you've secretly transferred over the years. Every bank card, every security token, every password. I will manage them to cover the company's deficit. I can guarantee that this matter will end here. No legal action will be taken. And the second option? He asked, trembling. Second, I hand this audit report along with all the evidence of your marital affair and your illegal gifting of assets to Lily Miller, to the SEC and the court. I looked him straight in the eye. At that point, you will not only face prison time, but your reputation will be destroyed. The choice is yours. Ethan collapsed onto the sofa, gasping for air. He was a trapped animal, finding every escape route sealed off. He knew I wasn't bluffing. With my professional expertise and the evidence I had, I could easily send him to jail. The psychological battle lasted a full 10 minutes. Finally, like a puppet with its strings cut, he slumped in defeat. I'll give them to you, he said, pulling out his wallet and throwing his credit cards onto the table. He recited a series of passwords for a security token in his safe at home. The password is Lily's birthday. At his last words, my hand tightened around my pen. Excellent. Even at death's door, he couldn't forget his true love. You've made a wise choice, I said, placing the cards in an envelope. And to show my sincerity, and to let you rest and recover, from now on, I will consult Miss Lily Miller on all major company decisions. After all, she is the owner of the company now. I deliberately emphasized the word owner. Ethan's head snapped up, his expression a mixture of confusion and suspicion. He probably thought I was showing weakness, that I was trying to appease Lily. His pathetic male ego led him to misjudge the situation. He believed that with Lily in charge, he would have a chance to make a comeback. He had no idea that I was only putting her on stage to be the most prominent and only target when the storm of debt finally broke. As for him, the man who once saw himself as the master of the universe, he had already lost the right to play the game. He was nothing more than a discarded pawn. After seizing all of Ethan's hidden assets, I began the second phase of my plan, piling on fictitious debt, using my shell corporations. I had the company, with Lily as its legal representative, sign a series of seemingly normal business contracts. Some were for raw materials at grossly inflated prices. Others were for exorbitant consulting fees or strategic partnerships with laughably low returns. Lily was ecstatic. She was completely oblivious to the complex contract clauses, seeing only the prestige of signing one major deal after another. Each time she would show them to Ethan for his approval. And Ethan, desperate to maintain his image as a strategic genius in front of her, would give them a cursory glance and encourage her to be bold. And so without their knowledge, the company's assets were legally and rapidly siphoned off, transferred to my offshore accounts, leaving behind a mountain of debt on the company's books. During this time, something unexpected but not surprising happened. Lily got pregnant. The news sent my in-laws into a frenzy of joy. Ethan was reinvigorated, as if he'd been given a shot of adrenaline. To him, this was a double blessing. The company was on the rise and another heir was on the way. He even started broaching the subject of divorce with me. "Maya," he said one evening in my study, his tone a mix of probing and feigned regret. "The company is back on track. And Lily, she's pregnant with my child. For us to continue like this, it's not fair to you or to her. Let's just separate amicably. Don't worry. After all these years, I won't let you walk away with nothing." "Oh, and what do you propose?" I asked, putting down my book. "The condo downtown and the car you're driving. You can keep them. And I'll give you $1 million in cash as compensation," he offered. As if this were a generous settlement. I laughed until tears came to my eyes. He had no idea that the scraps he was offering me were less than a fraction of the debt he now owed. "Ethan," I said, my laughter ceasing, "have you forgotten the company's shares are all in Lily Miller's name? And the company is currently over $20 million in debt, according to the nominee agreement she signed. She is personally liable for that $20 million. Are you sure you want to spend the rest of your life with a pregnant woman who is $20 million in the red?" The smug look on Ethan's face froze. $20 million, how did it get so high? That's business. Sometimes you win. Sometimes you lose, I said with an innocent shrug. Every contract Lily signed, I had her show to you. You approved them all. Now that the projects have failed and the money is gone, someone has to take responsibility. You set me up. Ethan finally realized, pointing a trembling finger at me. You're only just figuring that out now. Isn't it a bit late? I stood up and walked over to him. I set you up. Ethan, ask yourself, who set up whom first? Who, while I was breaking my back for the company, was setting up a second home? Who, while I was mortgaging my parents' house to keep the company alive, was secretly transferring $10 million to his illegitimate son, who swore he loved me to my face, then turned around and told his mistress I was a barren old hen? Every word was a hammer blow to his heart. His face went from red to white, then to a sickly green. He collapsed into his chair, speechless. I gave you a chance, I said, looking at his defeated form, my heart a stone. If you had just behaved, I might have, for the sake of our marriage, given you a dignified exit. But you were too greedy. You wanted my money and you wanted me to walk away with nothing to make room for your new family. Since you were so heartless, don't blame me for being cruel. That night, the charade was over. Ethan stopped mentioning divorce. He started trying to audit the company's books, desperate to find evidence of my wrongdoing. But every contract was airtight. Every transaction legal. He was a fly caught in a spider's web. The more he struggled, the more entangled he became. And I began to prepare for the final act. A few days later was my birthday. In previous years, no matter how busy he was, Ethan would always plan a surprise. This year, he mumbled a prefunctor, "Happy birthday" in the morning. And that was it. I knew he had a dinner date with Lily and her family, no doubt to celebrate their new life and the new baby. I didn't call him on his clumsy lie. That evening, I sat alone in our cavernous living room, opened a bottle of vintage red wine, and poured myself a glass. Then I took a picture of a corner of a draft divorce agreement and posted it on my social media, visible only to him, with the caption, "To the past. To a new beginning." Not 10 minutes later, he called, his voice frantic. "Maya, what is the meaning of this? That picture you posted? It means exactly what it says," I said, swirling the wine in my glass, my voice lazy. "I think it's time for our marriage to end." "No. I don't agree to a divorce. He yelled. Oh. And why not? Because we're husband and wife. He stammered. The best excuse he could come up with. Ethan. I chuckled. My laughter dripping with sarcasm. You clearly don't understand the current situation. Whether you agree or not is irrelevant. What is relevant is that I hold all the cards. I have enough to ensure that you and that entire family of yours will never recover. I paused. Then whispered. My voice a sliver of ice. Oh. And I forgot to mention the baby in Lily Miller's womb. It doesn't look much like you. The last part was a complete fabrication. But to a man already paranoid and pushed to the brink, it was the final straw. I heard his heavy, ragged breathing on the other end, followed by the sharp, shattering sound of a glass breaking. I knew he had finally completely lost his mind. And a crazed enemy is one who makes the most foolish and most fatal mistakes. The overture was complete. It was time to raise the curtain on the main event. Ethan was rushed to the hospital in the early hours of the morning. After returning to Lily's place from dinner, they had gotten into a massive fight. My taunt about the baby had pushed the already unstable Ethan over the edge. He had accused her of infidelity, even striking her. And Lily, no wilting flower, had screamed back, calling him a useless, bankrupt loser. In the ensuing struggle, Ethan had clutched his head, let out a terrible scream, and collapsed. This time, it was far more serious than the car accident. The diagnosis was a ruptured brain aneurysm brought on by extreme emotional distress causing a massive cerebral hemorrhage. When I arrived at the ER, the scene was even more chaotic than before. Lily, clutching her pregnant belly, was sobbing hysterically on a bench. My in-laws were pacing like headless chickens, muttering about bad karma. The lead surgeon pulled me aside, his face grim, and handed me a critical condition notice. Miss Evans, the situation is extremely grave, he said in a low voice. The B. Davising is extensive and is putting pressure on his brainstem. We need to perform another emergency craniotomy to relieve the pressure. But the surgical risk is incredibly high. The success rate is less than 30%. Even if he survives, he will most likely be in a permanent vegetative state or suffer severe neurological damage. I looked at the black and white document, every word a needle pricking my eyes. What about the cost? I asked. My voice shockingly calm. The initial surgery will be at least $100,000. The subsequent ICU care and rehabilitation, if he's in a coma for any length of time, it will be a bottomless pit. You'll need to be prepared for at least $500,000. Maybe more. $500,000. To the current Hayes family, that was an astronomical sum. I took the critical condition notice and walked over to them. You heard the doctor, I said, placing the flimsy piece of paper in front of my mother-in-law. Now a family member needs to sign to decide whether to proceed with the surgery. My mother-in-law stared at the terrifying words and the exorbitant cost, her hand shaking like a leaf in the wind. Do it. Of course we have to do it. Maya, go pay the bill. You have to save my son, she cried, grabbing my arm as if it were a lifeline. Mother, I want to save him. But I gently pulled my hand away and retrieved a stack of files from my briefcase, spreading them out on the bench. I'm out of money. These were the files I had my assistant prepare overnight. This is the seizure notice for our house. Due to the company's debts, the bank has foreclosed on it. It's going up for auction next week. This is the mortgage agreement for your house. The loan was used for the company's operations and is now in default. And this, I said, turning to Lily, is the latest financial audit of the company. Total debt, $30 million. And the legal bearer of this debt is Miss Lily Miller. Finally, this is my personal asset statement. As a guarantor for the company, All of my savings and investments have been frozen. Each document was a sledgehammer, shattering their last vestiges of hope. Lily stared at the report that tied her to a $30 million debt, her face ashen, her lips trembling. She finally understood. She hadn't signed a nominee agreement. She had signed her own indenture. My in-laws were in a state of shock. They had never dreamed that in a few short months their golden boy son would not only fall, but drag the entire family into an inescapable abyss. How did this happen? My mother-in-law whispered, her eyes vacant. The doctor is waiting for a signature, I said, bringing the focus back. 100,000 for the surgery. $500,000 for after our. We need to pull our resources. I certainly can't contribute. Mom. Dad. How much do you have in your retirement fund? And Lily? The West Village townhouse, although frozen, could probably be sold at a discount for a few million in cash. My suggestion was like throwing a match into a puddle of gasoline. No. My mother-in-law shrieked. That's our burial money. We can't touch it, and my house is not for sale. Lily screamed, a new fire in her eyes. That's what Ethan left for me and my son. Why should I use it to save him if he becomes a vegetable? Who will take care of us? Who will support us? He's the father of your child. The true love you were always talking about. He's dying and you won't even sell the house. I asked with a cold smile. Can true love pay the bills? Lily shot back, wiping her tears, her expression turning hard and vindictive. He's a burden now. A bottomless pit. Throwing money at him will just create a living corpse. I have 2 children to think about. I can't sacrifice their future for him. 2 children. It seemed my lie had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. You venomous woman, my mother-in-law shrieked, pointing at Lily. My son isn't even dead yet. And you're already cursing him. When you were spending his money, you didn't call him a burden. I spent his money because I gave him a son. I secured the Hayes family line. Lily retorted. Unlike some people who are just barren. As a full-blown catfight was about to erupt in the hospital corridor, I stepped in. That's enough. My voice wasn't loud, but it silenced them. I pulled another document from my briefcase. Since no one is willing to pay, my hands are tied. I sighed, my face a mask of sorrow. This is a transfer of medical proxy and a marital property separation agreement. As of this moment, I, Maya Evans, voluntarily relinquish all medical decision-making rights for Mr. Tensions, Ethan Hayes, and agree to the division of all our joint marital debts. In other words, his life or death and all the medical bills he incurs have nothing to do with me anymore. I held out the pen to my mother-in-law. Mother, you are his biological mother. And Lily, you are the mother of his child. The decision is now yours to make. To save him or not to save him. Choose. In that moment, I had legally and expertly tossed the hot, cruel potato of his fate squarely into their laps. The transfer of medical proxy I presented was a precision legal instrument, placing the scales of humanity directly in front of my in-laws and Lily Miller. On one side of the scale was Ethan's life, hanging by a thread, and the bottomless pit of medical expenses that came with it. On the other side was the last of their personal assets, their only means of survival and any hope for the future. The air in the corridor seemed to solidify. The only sound was the monotonous beep of the monitor from the ICU, counting down the seconds of Ethan's life. My mother-in-law held the pen, her hand trembling so badly she could barely form a grip. She made several attempts to sign, but hesitated each time. Her clouded eyes darted between her unconscious son and the thought of her retirement savings, her expression a contortion of maternal love and financial fear. Lily, on the other hand, had shed all pretense of grief. She stood with her arms crossed, her eyes cold and calculating. She was no doubt weighing the pros and cons. Saving a potentially vegetative Ethan versus abandoning him and keeping her property and the so-called inheritance. "Mom. What are you waiting for?" Lily's voice, though quiet, was a venomous snake striking at my mother-in-law's weakest point. "The doctor said the success rate is less than 30%. Even if he lives, he'll be a living corpse. Is it worth bankrupting ourselves for that? Don't forget, you have a grandson, Leo. We need to save our money to raise him properly. That's how we preserve the Hayes family line." She cleverly twisted the narrative, linking abandoning Ethan to saving their grandson, giving my mother-in-law a justifiable, self-soothing excuse. "But he's my son," my mother-in-law sobbed. "And because he's your son, you can't watch him spend the rest of his life in a bed with no dignity." Lily pressed on, her logic chillingly clear. "Letting him go peacefully as a kindness. We the living have to go on." My father-in-law, who had been squatting in a corner smoking, finally stood up and stubbed out his cigarette. She's right," he said, his voice. "We can't drag the whole family down for someone with no hope. We still have our grandson." And just like that, the life or death decision became a cost-benefit analysis. Family, love, marital duty, all were torn to shreds in the face of cold, hard reality, as worthless as the trash in the bin at the end of the hall. I remained silent, a spectator at the human drama I had directed. The condensation on the water bottle in my hand dripped down like their conscience slowly draining away. Under the combined persuasion of Lily and my father-in-law, my mother-in-law's fragile resolve finally shattered. She collapsed onto the bench, a deflated balloon, and with a trembling hand, signed her name. Lily followed suit without a moment's hesitation. "Maya Evans," she said, tossing the documents back at me, a flash of vengeful triumph in her eyes. "He's your family's problem now. His life or death has nothing to do with a high-powered lawyer like you. And don't even think about using his illness to extort another penny from us. Rest assured," I said, carefully folding the papers and putting them in my briefcase, a sad but relieved smile on my face. "The law requires spouses to support each other. But it does not require me to bankrupt myself to save my husband. Since both of you, his biological mother and the mother of his child, have made your decision, I, as an outsider, can only respect your choice." I deliberately emphasized the terms biological and legal, pinning all moral responsibility firmly on them. With the signed documents in hand, I walked towards the doctor's office. Behind me, I heard my mother-in-law's uncontrollable, heart-wrenching wails. How much of her grief was for her dying son, and how much was for the financial ruin that was now a reality only she knew. I didn't look back. My heart was as calm as a deep, still lake. I felt no victor's joy, no vengeful satisfaction, only a profound exhaustion. This marriage, this long, drawn-out saga of deceit and betrayal, was finally coming to its brutal definitive end. When I presented the signed documents to the head surgeon, even his experienced face showed a flicker of shock and regret. "Miss Evans, are you sure this is the family's final decision?" he asked, his professional ethics compelling him to double-check. "The patient's condition is critical, but not entirely without hope. As doctors, we still recommend." "I understand your position completely, Doctor," I interrupted, pushing the papers towards him, my voice heavy with feigned helplessness. "But as the patient's wife, I no longer have the authority to make that decision. The signatories on these documents are his mother and the mother of his child. Their decision is final. Personally, I would have bankrupted myself to save him. But unfortunately, my hands are tied. My performance was flawless." The doctor's gaze softened with sympathy. "I see. Very well. he sighed, signing off on the documents and handing them to a nurse. If that is the family's wish, then we will have to follow their directive and switch to palliative care. Palliative care was a euphemism for a dignified death. All expensive life support medications were discontinued, leaving only a basic nutritional drip and pain management until the patient's vital signs ceased. I had my voice recorder on the entire time, capturing the conversation. It was my final impenetrable firewall. Proof that I had advocated for treatment and that the cruel decision to pull the plug had been made by his closest relatives. I returned to the ICU corridor and watched from a distance as a nurse removed several 4 lines from Ethan's body, leaving only the oxygen mask. Throughout the process, his parents and Lily hid in the stairwell, unable to witness the scene. Only when the nurse emerged did they peek out like thieves. Is it over?" my mother-in-law whispered. I didn't answer, just pointed to the ICU window. Inside, Ethan lay still. The numbers on the monitor representing his heart rate and blood pressure began to fall slowly but surely. In that moment, my mother-in-law's legs gave out and she crumpled to the floor. My father-in-law turned away, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Only Lily remained unmoved, a look of profound relief on her face. She walked up to me. "Maya Evans, you won," she said in a low voice. "I didn't win. And you haven't necessarily lost," I replied calmly. "You simply made the choice you thought was best for you. Don't be so smug," she hissed. "Ethan may be gone, but his legacy and the child in my belly, they belong to the Hayes family. An outsider like you won't get a dime." "Is that so?" I smiled faintly, not bothering to argue. The real show was yet to come. She thought she was about to divide a rich inheritance. She had no idea she was about to inherit a banquet of debt. Ethan clung to life for another 24 hours. I never left the hospital, having my assistant bring me a change of clothes and my laptop. I worked from the corridor, projecting the image of a grieving but strong woman forced to handle her husband's affairs. I even had a media contact accidentally snap a photo of me looking haggard but resolute, keeping vigil. His parents and Lily, on the other hand, had disappeared after signing the papers. At 4:00 a.m. the next day, the line on the heart monitor finally went flat. The attending physician pronounced him dead. I covered my face, my shoulders shaking as if I were sobbing. But beneath my hands, a smile played on my lips. "Goodbye, Ethan. Thank you for teaching me the most vivid lesson on humanity, marriage, and the law." I immediately called the funeral home, arranging for the body to be collected with maximum efficiency. As they wheeled him away under a white sheet, I finally called my mother-in-law. "Mom, Ethan's gone," I said, my voice with grief. After a long silence, I heard her muffled sobs. "Also," I continued, "Ethan was always a private person. I've arranged for him to be cremated this morning. We can deal with the funeral arrangements after I've sorted out the company's debts." "What, cremated today?" her voice shrieked. "No. We haven't even seen him one last time. The dead can't be brought back." "Mom, what difference does it make?" I sighed. "Besides, the hospital morgue charges by the day. We simply can't afford it. Money, all you think about is money," she screamed. I didn't argue. I just hung up. I knew she wanted to see him, not out of love, but to confirm his death so she could start dividing the spoils. I wasn't about to let that happen. I wanted him gone quietly without a trace, leaving them with nothing to rally around. 3 hours later, I watched as Ethan's body was slid into the crematorium furnace. The flames roared to life, consuming his life of lies and betrayal. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of release. The rebirth of Maya Evans had begun. I didn't buy an expensive urn, I placed his ashes in a simple cloth bag and tossed it onto the backseat of my car. For the next few days, I disappeared, telling everyone I was handling the company's affairs. Lily and my in-laws blew up my phone, but I didn't answer. After confirming his cremation with the funeral home, they wasted no time in planning the division of his estate. Frank kept me updated. They had already hired a lawyer and were drafting an agreement, dividing up assets that I had already legally secured. A full-blown war had erupted between them over who deserved the bigger share. I let them fight. Then, on the 7th day after his death, I contacted them and scheduled a meeting at my office to discuss the inheritance. In the conference room, they sat on one side of the long table with their lawyer. I sat alone on the other. "Maya Evans, where are my son's ashes?" my mother-in-law demanded, her eyes red. "He is where he belongs," I replied coolly, then signaled my assistant to distribute the files. "Let's begin. We are here today to settle the estate of Mr. Ethan Hayes." Lily and her lawyer eagerly opened the files, expecting a list of assets. Their faces froze. The title of the document read, "A comprehensive list of the personal and corporate debts of Mr. Ethan Hayes." "What is this?" Lily's lawyer frowned. "Miss Evans, we are here to discuss the inheritance, not the debts." "You are mistaken," I said, leaning back in my chair. "This is his inheritance. According to our firm's accounting, the company Mr. Hayes was the beneficial owner of has a total debt of $37 million. In addition, he had a personal unsecured loan of $1 million. Therefore, the total value of his estate is $38 million. The room was silent. "No. Impossible." Lily shot up, pointing at me. "The company was recovering." "You're lying. You fabricated these debts." "Fabricated." I smiled and had my assistant turn on the projector. One by one, the contracts, the wire transfers, the bank statements, all bearing Lily's signature, appeared on the screen. "Miss Miller, please look closely. Every failed investment, every overpriced purchase was personally signed off on by you, the company's legal representative. According to the nominee agreement you signed, you bear unlimited personal liability for all company debts. In other words, you are personally responsible for repaying over $30 million. As for the $1 million personal loan, as it was incurred during the marriage, it is a joint debt. However, I have already successfully petitioned the court to have it assigned solely to him. Now that he is deceased, his heirs are responsible for repaying it from his estate. Which means," I said, my gaze sweeping over their pale faces, "that the three of you, as his primary heirs, must jointly assume this $1 million debt if you wish to inherit his estate, which, as we've established, is $37 million of debt. I renounce my inheritance." My mother-in-law shrieked. My father-in-law quickly followed suit. Only Lily remained, slumped in her chair, her face the color of ash. It didn't matter what she did. The company's debt was a mountain that had already crushed her. This was a setup, her lawyer muttered, staring at the airtight contracts. "Miss Evans, you are a master of your craft. It takes one to know one," I replied with a smile. "I am merely a lawyer who respects the sanctity of a contract. Everything was signed, sealed, and delivered, all according to the law." "What about my house, my car?" Lily grasped at her last straw. "Those are my personal assets." "I'm afraid not, Miss Miller," I said as my assistant projected the final slide. "Our investigation shows that the property and vehicle registered in your name were purchased with funds provided by Mr. Hayes during your cohabitation. This constitutes an illegal transfer of joint marital assets. As his legal wife, I have already filed a lawsuit to recover them. The court summons should be arriving at your door shortly." With a thud, Lily slid from her chair and collapsed onto the floor. Her dream of a wealthy life had not only vanished, it had been replaced by a black hole of debt that would swallow her whole. The inheritance she had schemed for was a massive tax on her soul. And I, as the primary creditor, would legally reclaim everything that was rightfully mine. And then some. The meeting ended not with a bang, but with the cold, hard finality of the law. I looked at the three of them. Once so arrogant, now so utterly defeated. I felt no joy. Only the quiet peace of a war finally won. The game was over. The downfall of the Hayes family was swift and absolute. Lily was buried under an avalanche of lawsuits from my shell corporations. The court ruled in my favor, transferring the West Village townhouse, the Porsche, and every expensive gift she had ever received from Ethan to me. She was declared bankrupt and placed on a credit blacklist. Overnight, she went from a socialite to a destitute woman with a 9-figure debt. The stress caused her to miss Ariri. I never saw her again, but Frank told me she was last seen with her son, Leo, in a slum, arguing with her landlord over a few hundred in rent. My in-laws fared no better. Though they had escaped the debt, the house they lived in was legally seized by my company. They became homeless. They tried to protest outside my office, but the police, faced with my flawless legal documentation, could do nothing. The last time I saw them, they were being dragged away by security. I had my assistant deliver a cardboard box to them. Inside were Ethan's ashes and a family photo of them with Ethan, Lily, and Leo. A note was attached. "This is the son and grandson you always wanted. He's all yours now." I heard my mother-in-law fainted on the spot. They never bothered me again. The long, draining war was over. I had not only survived, but I had absorbed all of Ethan's assets and his company's core business into a new corporation under my name. I had won my money, my dignity, and my freedom. But I felt no joy. Alone in the house we once shared, I felt a bone-deep weariness. I had won, but I had won alone. The first thing I did was sell the house. I moved into a high-rise apartment downtown with a view of the entire city. I started to learn how to live for myself again. I planted flowers on my balcony, read the books I never had time for, took up yoga and oil painting. My law firm thrived. I was still the same sharp, relentless lawyer, but I had learned to be at peace with myself. One night, Frank asked me if I ever had nightmares. I have no regrets. I told him I was just exercising my rights. If there was a trial, I was merely the plaintiff. The final verdict was delivered by their own greed and stupidity. "So, what's next for you? Are you going to be alone forever?" "What's wrong with being alone?" I smiled. "I have a complete self, a healthy body, and absolute financial freedom. That's more reliable than any relationship." I no longer believed in marriage, but I believed in myself. That toxic relationship hadn't destroyed me. It had forged me into something stronger. A few months later, I made a surprising decision. I handed over the daily operations of my firm to my partners and started a non-profit foundation providing free legal aid to vulnerable women trapped in abusive marriages. I had met too many women like the old me, deceived and dispossessed, who had no one to fight for them. I wanted to be their light. One sunny afternoon, my first client arrived. She was a young, weary woman, and her story was eerily similar to mine. After she finished, I handed her a glass of warm water, the simple gesture I had once so desperately needed. "Don't be afraid," I said, looking into her eyes and smiling. "You are not alone. From now on, I am your lawyer. You have to believe that the law may be slow, but justice will always prevail." In that moment, as the sunlight streamed through the blinds. I saw a flicker of hope rekindle in her eyes, and I felt a sense of peace I had never known. Perhaps this was the true meaning of my revenge. It was not about destruction. It was about seeing the abyss and then turning around to become the light that could illuminate it for others. Maya Evans, after burying my own marriage, had finally won for myself a complete and blameless salvation.